So officially welcome to Experiential Learning through Simulation Technology from the Global Business School Network. For those of you who are unfamiliar with us, the Global Business School Network is a nonprofit organization. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we have a network of leading business schools that are working to improve management education for the developing world. We do this through networking, knowledge sharing activities such as this webinar, and events such as our annual conference. And we have capacity building programs that help business schools in the developing world. We currently have 54 member schools in 26 countries. This is a list. I don't expect you to be able to absorb all of this right here, but if you are interested in membership, each school goes through an application process and makes a commitment to be engaged with our mission of strengthening management education for the developing world, and we are happy to answer any questions that you might have about becoming a member or otherwise getting involved with the Global Business School Network. I do want to mention that today we are working with the Global Management Challenge USA to present this webinar. If you're not familiar with it, the Global Management Challenge is a simulation challenge, and the largest one in the world. It is in all of these countries that you see before you, and for those of you in the USA, there is a free trial of the competition which starts in January. The free trial will be starting this October, so you can take a look at it for free and see if it's the right thing for you. I also want to mention for the GBSN member schools that are on the line today, we do have the opportunity to provide sponsorship for 3 of our member schools that would like to put teams into the Global Management Challenge. So if you are interested in putting a team together and you're a GBSN member and you're based in the US, please do send us an email and I'll give you all of the details about how that will work. And I'm sure that our presenter, Dan Davidson, will be talking more about the Global Management Challenge, so I won't go into that too much, but it is a really fantastic opportunity. With that, I do want to introduce our presenters for today, Dan Davidson and Jeffrey Strauss. Dan Davidson works for Edit 515, which is the developer of the Global Management Challenge simulations, among others. He's been involved in the development and presentation of computer simulation management courses since 1970, and he's been actively involved in creating challenging background and start positions for teams who participate in the Global Management Challenge. And our other presenter today, who will be providing more of a faculty's perspective on simulations for business education, is Jeffrey Strauss. He is the Associate Director of the Center for Technology and Innovation Management at Northwestern University's Buffett Center for International and Comparative Studies. And anybody who wants to repeat that back to me at the end gets an extra prize. He has been working with simulations for many, many years and started implementing them, and I'm sure he'll tell you more about this, because he needed to find a way to provide that experiential learning opportunity for his students, and so has come up with some innovations in simulations for his classroom. And so we're looking forward to hearing from him talk about that. I myself am Paige Buchanan. I am the Communications Officer here at the Global Business School Network, and I will be moderating our Q&A discussion today. So before we get started, I just want to take a moment to find out who is with us today. So if you will please let us know who you are. Are you a faculty, a business professional? Are you a school administrator, a student? Are you an other? And just so that we can have an idea of who we're talking to, so Dan and Jeff can think about that as they are presenting. It looks like we have an interesting mix of people. We have some faculty, some business professionals, some administrators, great, and a bunch of others. We'll have to have a question and find out who the others are. All right, looks like almost everybody has voted now, so I'm going to count down to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. one, and we'll close the poll. All right. And now you can see kind of who is with us today. And I do have one other question for you, and that is, what is your experience with simulations? We're very curious about why you're here and if you have any experience with simulations at all. It looks like about half of you have voted, and we're up to 75%. And so I'll give you another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And as you can see, we have a good mix. A lot of people who are interested in simulations maybe haven't participated or used them before, but we do have some experience in the crowd. So for those of you who are new to simulations or who are using them and want to find out more, I hope that this is a useful conversation for you, and I encourage you to ask your questions. We will be leaving plenty of time to have a conversation at the end with Dan and Jeff. So with that, I want to encourage you again, ask your questions, and I am going to hand the mic over to Dan Davidson, who will be talking about simulations. So Dan, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Dan Davidson. I'm a director of Edit 515 Limited, and have been involved with computer simulations, both as a developer and tutor, using them as teaching tools in universities and businesses for many years. Simulations can be used in many ways: for team building, behavioral studies, assessment of participants for promotion, training in specific topics, for example, understanding accounting, learning forecasting, and teaching the complexity of a business environment.
Dan, can I interrupt you one
Yes?
second really quickly? We cannot see your screen.
Sorry?
We are not able yet to see your screen.
Well, I put up the presentation first. Do you want me to?
All right, you are the presenter. So make sure that you're showing your screen on your control panel.
Yeah, it says simulation virtual business environments.
Yes.
On the screen.
Okay, on your control panel, are you able to see the button that says show my screen under screen sharing?
Yes.
Okay,
so
why don't you click on that?
Will I click on that? Okay.
Fantastic. All right, go for it.
Fine. Okay. So we can also use simulation to demonstrate the skills required to manage a competitive business scenario, and in group organizations, showing participants how to function as a business group. Okay. Now, can you only see my simulation slide? I currently have something else on.
All we can see is your simulation slide.
Okay, that's fine. Right, so I'd like now to start my presentation. Okay, what we call the use of simulations is to create virtual business environments, and we're mainly involved in training for business. So why is simulation so important? Well, basically, it allows a realistic, competitive environment to be created at low cost and low risk. And this means that in a business, we can train people to make mistakes that would be very expensive if they were actually making the decisions in business. And there are lots of examples of this in actual businesses. How is it used? Well, fortunately, most people now, students, have laptops, and we can run simulations on a standard laptop, and the participants can use their own laptops to analyze the data. And it's been used in universities, training centers, and businesses. Now, the teaching and training objectives is to allow participants to gain insight really into the complexity of a business environment. That's what we're mainly interested in, and the skills required to manage a competitive business scenario. The rewards for participation in an academic environment are it enables students to operate as a group. Normally, students, if they're studying, are studying a subject alone. This really forces them to work as a group. And from the academic point of view, it sensitizes the students to the value of subsequent classroom courses and lectures. This is valued by the academics because it enhances their presentation of the specialist subject. And to the students, it identifies the skill deficiencies directly so that they can see where someone else in the group is better at something than they are. And therefore they can learn what they need to learn, which again is a good thing for the academic situation. If we are looking at national international competition, which is the Global Management Challenge, it allows teams to measure themselves against experts, because some of the teams who play the Global Management Challenge have played for many years and are extremely expert. And it also gives status to the team, the business or the university, if they progress to the final. And if they progress to the international final, then governments become interested. So it's a very valued thing from a prestige point of view. The Global Management Challenge, as has been said, is the biggest international competition of strategy and management simulation. And this is an ideal way to enter a national or international competition because it's so easy to do, and quite often for students there are sponsors who put up the money so that student teams can enter the competition. So it's worthwhile for the universities or the students trying to find out if these sponsorships are available. And the simulations, as have been said, have been created by Edit 515. The questions that students ask from the beginning in any simulation that's being played out, the groups accept that they are in a competition with other groups, which is very good. So in an open forum, they don't ask many questions because they don't wish the other teams to deduce what their strategy might be. However, in the team rooms where the tutor can lead the discussion, it allows the tutor to assist the formation of group activity and advise on specific areas of meeting deadlines, marketing, group structure, production and finance. Simulation requirements. To be successful, the students must feel that the simulation is realistic, and therefore if they make decisions they expect results to be accurate and relate to their experience. In the cases where in fact they don't have a realistic view of what should be happening, then the tutor can explain why the results vary from their expectations. The teams should compete against each other. The actual simulation should be transparent. There should be no feeling that they're trying to beat the computer in any sense. They're trying to compete against the other groups. And the simulation must be sufficiently complex to require team participation. It's pointless having a simulation that's so simple that each of the individuals can play or take part themselves. We're really looking for something that requires the input from all of the team members. This slide shows the format of the process where the history is given out. The teams analyze the history, they make their decisions, these are handed in, the simulation carries out the computation and hands out management reports. Now, this cycle can be repeated as often as the tutor wishes. It can be 2 hourly, weekly, or at monthly intervals, if desired. It depends how the tutor wants to use the simulation and whether it's for part-time students or full-time students or for a course, say, at the weekend. The learning agenda. Some of the things that students in particular need to learn is punctuality. They tend to arrive after the start of something, and meeting deadlines. Because there's a fixed timetable for decision making, meeting deadlines is important in the simulation. These are behavioral items and are difficult to inculcate in a normal lecture, but we have a process which we call status quo, so that if a team hasn't met the deadline, then the simulation can run their previous decisions. And these might not be good decisions for this timescale because there is seasonality, etc. So that we can put pressure on them to meet the deadlines. And these are valued business qualities. So this is one way of informing students that they really should pay attention to these. Now, checking results, we've got to check the input and the output. Unless checking procedures are put in place, the results can be devastating for the group. This is a powerful incentive to participants to set up checking procedures. Again, these are behavioral functions, and it may take a few repetitions before it sinks in that they really have to be accurate. So that accuracy is essential. If only one laptop is used by participants, a disorganized committee tends to congregate around the laptop. This structure can result in poor meeting of deadlines and accuracy of results. A better way of the group behaving is to have functional specialists. Allocating the functions of managing director and specialist functions to participants opens up the group to function as a real organization does. This allows participants to spend time in their specialist area and then come together to contribute their knowledge to the group. This slide is showing the way profit or loss moves towards the balance sheet and the payment of dividend. Simulation is an effective way to teach the ability to read financial accounts and to use them to improve decision making. After a few iterations of the decision-making process, participants become proficient at using profit and loss, cash flow, and balance sheet statements. Attending a lesson or an hour's lecture on accounts very quickly fades, I have found in the past, having attended a few of these, whereas using the information to analyze, to compete with another team, the competition factor means that attention is paid to the detail. And after a few iterations, it's amazing to see the participants reading these financial statements without any problem. Conflict resolution arises if the group, having split into specialist categories, decide that their category is the most important. This normally happens with marketing, who decide that they want the best product with the highest quality and tend to ignore the production facilities that are available, or the staffing, or the finance that's available. If the group acts as functional specialists, the balance between marketing, production, human resources, and finance can be discussed. This requires that the managing director ensures time is available for this function. Financial information is important to improve the profitability of the decisions. We come to analysis. In this presentation, I'm only going to give one or two examples just to show you the type of analysis that's carried out. Price sensitivity. An example of the type of analysis required if the orders are plotted against the prices decided upon, then trends can be identified. This analysis can be complicated because there are seasonal effects. The trend is influenced also by the amount spent on marketing, the quality of the products, etc. But it allows students at least to begin to realize how important this analysis is, which is the function of the simulation. The decision-making process, really, the group should decide the strategy. Do they want high quality, high price products, or do they want stack them high and sell them quick so that they have low price, possibly low quality, but high volume? Having decided this, then they agree on a marketing plan. Then they have to forecast the sales, production, staffing, finance, build in flexibility, and make their decisions, right? In order to make sure that this process is carried out smoothly, then it requires group discipline, and this is another thing that we're quite keen that the students and other participants learn, that an uncoordinated committee tends not to make very good decisions. An example of a decision that might be made is the sales force. How many? Where do we want to put them? Is an example of one decision that is required. Now, in any simulation, the number of individual decisions required varies with the complexity of the simulation. There are very good simulations with as few as 10 decisions, or highly complex simulations with 70 or more decisions requiring to be made in each period. If we come to competing, this is a photograph of one of the teams in the national final of the Global Management Challenge. And if you notice, there are two participants discussing a point raised by their analysis. In the foreground, another is using a spreadsheet to assist analysis. Teams in the international finals arrive with each participant having a sophisticated spreadsheet model, and at the top end of the learning curve for competition is modeling the decision process. And each of the teams who have been in the finals for more than one occasion, in fact, are very sophisticated models. At the end of the process, total concentration can be exhausting. So here we have a participant who has handed in the final decision and then collapsed. We of course have to evaluate results. Normally we use share price so that there's an objective measure to say which team has won in the competition, right? Now, a shareholders meeting will always have an irate shareholder who wants answers to why the share price is lower than desired. In university and businesses, the students are expected to give a 15-minute presentation of their strategy and the ensuing decisions in English. This can be informative and entertaining, especially if the results have been poor. That's a quick run through of my view of simulations, the advantages that can be brought from simulation. So I'd like to stop there and pass over to Jeff to get his view of simulation. So thanks very much for watching.
Great. Well, thank you so very much. I'm going to hand everything over to Jeff Strauss now from Northwestern University. Jeff?
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much. And actually, Dan, you gave me a lot to react to, which is terrific. Let me just see if I can get myself on. Is my screen showing?
Yep, you look great.
Oh, wonderful. Well, okay. I am, as Paige had introduced me, I'm actually, in fact, she joked about the length of the organization. It actually used to be a lot longer because we started out as a National Science Foundation Industry University Cooperative Research Center. So if you can imagine adding that to the Center for Technology Innovation Management and the Buffett Center, that would have taken up most of the time that I have just to say where I'm from. Basically, we've been using simulations for the past 12 to 15 years or so, but for a very particular reason. And I think it results in a somewhat different emphasis, perhaps, than the description that Dan had just given. We basically, for some time, have been interested in trying and been teaching about what it means to be operating in an emerging economy. And actually, that can either mean essentially a developing country, or it could actually, we also had begun to also use it for conditions where there is a very new technology. And essentially, what we were trying to do is to, the US military had come up with a term called VUCA, and that's VUCA, and that stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Usually when I mention those terms, everyone reacts to the fact, well, that sounds like my day today. But the fact is that what we needed to do was to find a way to help students to experience conditions with high levels of uncertainty, where there's very, very little information. Sometimes the information is actually contradictory. And so where many of the assumptions and the approaches that students were used to using, either from their experience or sometimes even from what they were learning in their other kind of business courses, simply didn't work. And we wanted them to try to find a way to experience that. And we had found that, generally speaking, cases didn't do it. What tended to be in a case is there'd be a very narrowly structured situation, often from a perspective of finance or marketing or whatever. There might potentially be a case A, and then there's a case B, and the primary difference was that the B is 5 years later or something, but it didn't reflect the dynamic kinds of conditions. It didn't give them a chance to really see all the different kinds of things that were impacting them simultaneously. And so we thought we should find a way to do that. We first tried by doing something that had a lot of kind of glossiness to it. It was it was done by an organization that it invested a lot in terms of the appearance, and there's a lot of things that made it look real. The problem was that it was very little control by the instructor, and it was something where the students were required to kind of work through on their own and eventually reach some kind of a conclusion, but it was very difficult to use within a course setting. And so part of our attention was also to make something simple and easily adapted to different kinds of course settings. And so we eventually became up with the simulations that were largely document-based, and they really still are to this day. The second thing we tried to do was, while the initial intent was to make a simulation that would help people to experience emerging economy-like conditions, and I should say that our other concern was that even though the Kellogg School here at Northwestern and others, of course, often students go to emerging economies, the problem is that volatility is difficult by its very nature to predict. And so at the time that a student might visit a country, they may not experience the volatility. And of course, if it's very volatile, you don't want to send the student there to begin with. There's a lot of risk. And so we wanted to have controlled experience. But the second thing we tried to do is to also have an approach that might work by schools in emerging economies to help reflect more accurately the kinds of conditions that their students were actually experiencing day to day. And finally, we wanted to do something that we work a lot with industry and to have things that would be useful for companies as well. The simulations that we use, I teach courses in both the graduate level and undergraduate level, and in direct business kinds of courses and things that are somewhat indirect business related. And I've also done a lot of use of this thing in various countries like Ukraine and Japan and Poland and Japan and Thailand, etc. Here is a brief view of what the kinds of things we think about, and I'll try to describe it a bit further as we go along. But what we wanted to do was to vividly and fully capture the context in which business is done. Really, our focus is much less what's going on within the company in terms of different functions, and rather the environment in which the companies are operating. So what kinds of things are happening in the operating environment that will impact on what a company is able to do and what decisions make the most sense. We want to demonstrate the complexity of a situation, what the trade-offs are, bring out a lot of perspectives from different stakeholders, including many stakeholders perhaps that students might not normally think about in the society. Look at decisions that are real, that have implications for real life, but are things that are things that they might not normally kind of encounter. We wanted to also have a way to apply tools. Now, when we talk about tools, there are a lot of things that we've adapted, particularly for use in these kind of VUCA-like environments, variations on road mapping, scenario planning, mind mapping to look at interrelationships between things. And we also use the simulations as a way of introducing that use of those tools. And these are things that challenge and augment the usual kinds of things that students do. And finally, we wanted to make it engaging and fun. Some of the things we've done, and we developed them specifically so they can be used in many different ways on a modular basis individually, but also could be kind of done as a sequence of several simulations. It's been used in a number of different schools around both in the US and around the world. And it is designed to kind of help people understand what does it mean to operate in a VUCA-like environment where there's a lot of change, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of ambiguity. All of them push students to think about very subtle kinds of issues. They require students to look from a variety of different stakeholders. They help them to look at where they're vulnerable to change and where their strengths may no longer be strengths in a different environment. And basically students work in a sense as consultants and teams to develop recommendations. Our simulations tend to be fictitious companies and fictitious countries, but they're based on real situations that we've helped people work through. We once had I joked with Paige yesterday, we once had offered extra credit to student groups if they could prove they had been to these fictitious countries. Unfortunately, several groups did prove they had been there. It's amazing what you can do with Photoshop. And so we no longer offer that for extra credit. But these are fictitious in part because we wanted to limit the ability of students to look it up on the internet and think that they had the answer, which of course they would not. The simulations that we have tended to be of many different kinds, many different lengths. And they can be taken apart. They can be used. They can go anywhere from an hour and a half, the same simulation, an hour and a half to 2 weeks with lectures interspersed within it. They're meant to be used in a very flexible kind of a way. And they range a lot in terms of both industry, target region, area, and the kinds of issues. And so there could be things, a lot of the important things we encountered when thinking about emerging economies are legacies of many different kinds. what is actually the country transitioning from? What are things that are still likely to be there? Where is the unevenness in terms of the infrastructure? And so these would be things from, this happens to be a real country, of course, but there are things about economic and political kinds of issues that might be there. There'd be, in some cases, the government would provide scenarios would be insufficient because they may be politically motivated. But there would be things about looking at development issues. Then we would move to thinking about things like national government. How much do you want to be connected to the government? How much would you perhaps prefer to have a partner that is sort of under the view screen of the government, I mean, beyond the view screen? They would look at kind of resources, levels of investment and startups. We'd look at technology evolution. Is the company working with a technology that itself is unclear and uncertain and developing, and that's interspersing with the development of the country, and there are many different factors that might impact legacies. In this particular case, we had to be looking at legacy for a long period of military control. We had another one where in this country of Pendin Mai, which is, of course, a fictitious country in Southeast Asia. We looked at the issue about supply chain relationships, but then we still looked at political, economic, and currency chain variations, and there are many different kinds of trade-offs. We had one here related to sensor technology, where there was a lot of issues about moving from one tier position in a supply chain to another as the technology changed within a changing global environment. And finally, we were looking at solar technology. Here's an example just to show how a fictitious country might actually fit within a real world. Obviously, this white part, as far as we know, does not really exist. We created this country of Churosa, and we created several different kind of options within that country. Here's one where you can see this country of Pendin Mai. I can't hear any of you, but you might think about whether any of you have been to Pendin Mai. I hope not, since it's supposed to be fictitious. And as far as I know, here there's just water. There isn't really a country. But here's Nueva Esperanza, the country. We created a flag for it, and that's where the country would exist. I also joked with Paige that we had a student in a class if we happened to be from Nicaragua and lived right along here, and they were very unhappy with us when we created this country because they said they used to have a oceanfront property, and now they don't have an oceanfront property anymore. We also are developing now some new kinds of simulations related now to supply chain, energy, smart manufacturing, big data, and standards in particular. We're working with this with the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Rockwell Automation is a company, and IBM has been very involved. That may help us to really augment the visual appearance of this. And we're developing one related to entrepreneurship in this kind of VUCA environment with Zhejiang University. I should mention one other thing related to how the simulations work, and that is that a lot of what we do is that we present some background information. There's a challenge. Students are supposed to come up with specific recommendations for their consultants. But the large part of what we do is providing updates. And these updates, which would be very short paragraph descriptions of something has happened, are on many, many different dimensions. It might be there's been a political shift. There's been an evolution in the technology. There's been something that happened in the region. Something happened with a competitor. Something that is drawing attention away from this within the company that they're providing advice to. Many different dimensions, and these are all meant to be flexible and easily adapted by the instructor, whoever the instructor might be using this. And so you might, based on student response, the recommendation, you might say, well, I'm going to use this update rather than that update. I'm going to juggle the order of these things a little bit. But the updates are intended to challenge assumptions. They're meant to, students have to develop an initial recommendation, and in doing that, they've made assumptions. But then things change. There's a dynamic, the dynamics have shifted. And now they realize, well, that recommendation really doesn't work anymore because this has happened, or that has happened. I didn't anticipate that. Or maybe because they've done a good job of scenario planning, they did anticipate a little bit more. But they may have to make adjustments along the way. And that's essentially what we're basically about. And so we minimize the quantitative data. There's really not very much that students there aren't very many numbers for students to crunch. We've had students who are very frustrated by that. They're used to being presented with data, and they do something, massage the data. But the reality is that often in the world, you don't get the data the way you'd like it, or there's one piece of data that doesn't really work with this piece of data. You don't know what's real. And so here they have to make guesses. They have to check their assumptions as they go along. They have to modify and adjust. And that's essentially what the focus is of what the kinds of simulations we're trying to use. We've done this a lot with the Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education, where we've worked with their annual meetings in terms of faculty groups getting together, and we've tried to massage and adapt things for different kinds of applications, and it's been an exciting process to become involved with. We don't have competitions really, but we have instead trying to make it something that can be used in a variety of different ways. That's what I've got. Hello?
Apologize for that break. Hi, I muted myself just in case because I was doing a little bit of typing there. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. We have had a few questions come in during the presentation, and I want to encourage the rest of you, if you do have questions, to submit them or to raise your hand if you would like to be taken off of mute. If you do have a microphone that is necessary in order to speak. But my first question that came in, and
By the way, let me
is
just mention, I just noticed, Paige, your request to speak slower. It's too late now. I will try to speak slower in my responses.
yes, we did have that. So
I'm
both of you,
sorry.
if you could appreciate, we do have people coming from
I
many
do, and
many
I
different
was very
countries.
concerned about the time to make sure there was time for questions, but I'm sorry if
Oh,
I was too fast.
not a problem at all. We will have a recording so that people can review this if they'd like. But the first question that we had comes from, I'm going to say his name incorrectly, and I'm sorry, Douglas Veland, who is here in the U.S., saying that he's familiar with simulation products for sale by various companies such as CapSim, interpretive simulations, etc. What product exactly is used by the Global Management Challenge USA? The question. I guess Dan would be a really good person to answer that.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. I wasn't clear about the question about the Global Management Challenge. Could you repeat that, please?
What exactly is the program that is used by the Global Management Challenge, the simulation program?
Oh, the simulation program. Well, the programs that we have created, we actually have developed ourselves. That they don't use a simulation program. We use whatever programming language suits whatever we're doing. So that for the spreadsheets we use Excel. If there's number crunching, we tend to use Fortran because it's very, very quick. But for the presentations, we can use Visual Basic. So we create our own simulation package.
Great. So the next question comes from Barbara Stillwell, who's with Intera Health International, also in the U.S., saying that it looks as though this methodology could be used with government policymakers to teach database decision and policymaking, especially in VUCA national conditions. Do either of you have any experience with this?
Well, actually, as a matter of fact, we are just the thing that I had mentioned at the very end. This is Jeff Strauss. One of the things that we're working on with the National Institute for Standards and Technology is trying to develop a simulation that would be used both within government agencies, but also within business schools as part of to find a way to have standards be covered more effectively. There is a simulation actually that this NIST has been using primarily for training of policymakers in the U.S. government, which is one that was developed by a guy actually out of Holland who now is at Harvard, and we will be kind of modifying that and making use of it. I think it's certainly some of the things that we do could be useful for that, and again to try to help, perhaps in our case, to help policymakers better understand implications of policies in very much evolving kinds of conditions.
Great. Okay. So moving on then, our next, and I do apologize if I get the name wrong again, Shiv Tripathi, who's calling us from Tanzania, asks, in most East African business schools, they need a complete solution, including simulation and faculty training. Do you also offer to train the trainer program for academic institutions? And I would probably add on to that, what training is required in order for faculty who are used to more traditional lecture or even case teaching in order to effectively use simulation technology in the classroom?
Yeah. Well, could I start
Absolutely.
on that one? What we find is that because the lecturers or professors who are interested in using the simulation tend to be involved in that kind of process. We could send them the simulation with the instructions, and they pick it up quite easily. We also have the situation that quite often people who have been on courses using our simulations then become professors, if you like, so that in a situation where someone required us to hold their hand, then what we would tend to do is to perhaps run a simulation with them present to show them how the whole process works, and then pass it over to them.
Yeah, I think that I would agree with that completely. That I think the problem often is with faculty. In our particular case, let's say that there are simulations that might deal with emerging economy conditions or VUCA conditions with technology, that sometimes we have faculty who themselves have not experienced those kinds of conditions. And so what we would tend to do is to try to encourage them to work through the simulation themselves before they would ever attempt to offer it. We do also try to provide, when we can, kind of teaching notes in effect to help. We have run sessions, in effect, training the trainers, as I had mentioned, with the U.S. Department of Education, and I think that that has been very useful. The problem sometimes is that, and I think this is true for what Dan, you were saying too, and that is that we also try to encourage this to be done in groups. And sometimes it is not so simple to get groups of faculty together to be training. But so in that sense, it would be useful perhaps to have more workshops or something like that that would be using these kinds of approaches. But it is not so difficult perhaps to pick up. It can be an issue, and again, that's why we have tried to make it more modular and flexible. How much depth the instructor wants to go into in terms of using the simulation, there is a danger that they can be exposing their own lack of experience with the kinds of things they're trying to teach using the simulation. So we would try to perhaps work more closely with faculty and helping them to understand how to adapt it for their courses and their own experience.
Great. So we do have a quick question from Mark White, who is in the U.S., asking if it's possible to get access to the CTIM simulations. Is there information on a website, or is that something that we can provide?
Yes, well, we have a website, edit5, 515.co.uk. So that's our website, and the Global Management Challenge also have numerous websites, so that the information about the details of simulation, they would find there.
And Jeff, yeah.
Well, in my case, a lot of what we have now is in effect document-based, meaning that there would be I mean, we've used it primarily, we use it as a web-based, but effectively it's documents, and that means that in effect there is a background document. There are updates that are essentially Word documents, and so these are things that we can easily package and send to anybody who might want them. But again, the issue kind of is how best to make use of it. But we don't have a particular website, but we also don't charge anything. So at this point, I think that we have been negligent in making a profit. So these are documents that we can easily circulate for any number of these different simulations, just to give an idea as to what they are, and then make some suggestions as to how they might be adapted.
Right. And so if you would like to get in touch, I would be happy to put you in touch. Just send me a quick email. I'm the one who's been sending out all of the emails about this webinar. Feel free to email me, and I will put you in touch with Jeff if you would like to talk more about getting those documents. So we have another question. This is from Rebecca Marsh with Emerald and in Great Britain, and she asks about the approach being used for school children, and could it be used for school children in a different format? Is that something that you have a thought about?
Yeah, well, we have had quite a few contacts with the educational system. The difficulty is that it's quite easy to get a particular school or a headmaster enthusiastic about using any of our simulations, but then he finds it very difficult to get further up the chain, especially if he's looking for any kinds of money to get facilities for equipment. Now schools have more and more equipment that might become easier, but it's quite difficult to get into the top level because education tends to be a hierarchy. Uh, but if schools are interested in using simulation, then I don't see a problem in principle in doing it. But we've always ended up fading away rather than progressing when we've had these discussions.
Yeah, I would again tend to agree with that. I think that it's actually something I've thought about quite a bit, and I actually had some discussions with some schools at different levels, and at least here in the United States. And I think the challenge again is to find the right course setting for use of the kinds of simulations that we do as well. And then in turn, there's the same issue with whether the faculty themselves have a sufficient base of experience in the kinds of things we're trying to teach. I think fundamentally there'd be no problem in adapting the things that we have to, in fact, in some respects, I mentioned that I have been using this both for graduates and undergraduates. It actually, in some respects, is easier with the undergraduates than the graduates, and I suspect it might be also almost easier with school children because they're more open in some ways. They've had less formal training and techniques that they're trying to apply unsuccessfully to the kinds of environments we're trying to communicate. So I think that it certainly can be fairly readily adapted, at least to give them experience in dealing with change and uncertainty. But I suspect that we would need to work with faculty to adapt it. But again, I don't really see a problem in being able to do so if there are faculty who are willing to do it.
Right, and Rebecca did have another question, and that had to do with the evaluation. And how does the evaluation of submissions take place?
Well, in the situation we've got, then the evaluation uh, up until now has depended on the share price, and the share price is influenced by a whole lot of factors. But the basic one is the company profitable, but then we have quality of the products, image, and so on, whether they have stock, whether the bank would view them as being a healthy company or not. But at the end of the day, we have share price or an equivalent to share price so that the competitors can see whether they've done well or not. And you get a range of results. But the people who learn may well be the people who don't win because they go away thinking about why didn't we do this or why didn't we do that. So they probably learn more than the winners who think, oh yes, we're very clever. But basically, ours depends on an evaluation of how well the company has done.
Yeah, in our particular simulations, that actually is an excellent question, and it is a challenge. And the reason is because since we are not really dealing with sort of quantitative results, particularly, one of the we're in effect teaching soft skills, meaning we're teaching students like to be better, more comfortable, or better able to deal with ambiguity, with change, things like that. That's very hard to measure, and so and there isn't exactly a right answer that can be read in the things we do. We try to avoid that, in fact. So to an extent, what we're looking for from students is how thorough they are, and we try to measure whether they're able to make a good argument based on the information, that why they have made the recommendation they have, and whether they, and also we're trying to teach them to, again, use kinds of tools like a road mapping or mind mapping, scenario planning. Are they using those kinds of things in an effective way that gives them a better insight and makes their strategy more robust, that it seems to be to hold together better. And then what we would tend to do in courses is we might try to have exams that have, in a sense, almost mini simulation situations, and have them respond to those in sort of essay form, and again, trying to see, have they considered the range of different factors that are going on? Have they anticipated changes? Have they developed strategies that would respond to different kinds of conditions as they evolve? Have they considered a wide range of stakeholders? And so it's the thoroughness, perhaps, of their response that we're trying to evaluate.
Well, we have just a little bit of time. I'm going to take a question. We have Daniel Sawaz hand is raised here. So Daniel, I'm going to take you off of mute, and you are welcome to ask your question. Daniel, are you with us?
Yeah. Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm Manisha from Ghana, Valley University. Yeah, we realized that the GMC, the Global Management Challenge, with the manual, it actually explains the
Excuse me,
aspects
but you're
of.
kind of fading in and out.
Daniel, can you move the microphone a little closer to your mouth? Maybe you sound kind of far away.
Oh, okay. Okay. Can you hear me now?
That's much better.
Okay. Okay. I want to ask that can the creators of this program, this meta, also prepare a tutorial aspect of the program, so we can have a fair idea of how to analyze the situations that we have, because some of us sometimes find it difficult in analyzing this data. So, well, I was suggesting that if you can also, prepare a tutorial application that can enable us to understand the method very well. Thank you.
All right, I had a lot of trouble understanding, I think, through the
Okay.
connection.
Okay.
Jeff, were you able to catch that?
I'm not sure.
I'll try. Did you get me?
Well, barely. The problem is that yeah.
I was asking about if you can prepare tutorial application, a tutorial.
A tutorial.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Yeah. So that we can understand the simulator very well. Hello?
That's a very good. It's a very good question. The short answer is no. We should. No, we don't exactly have that. I mean, again, at least in one particular simulation, we had developed sort of teaching notes, which is somewhat like a tutorial. But I agree with you. Actually, I think that would be an excellent thing to do. We haven't actually done that.
Yeah, I think we have a video which I had intended to show in this presentation, but there were some technical problems. But Paige is going to put it onto the website. So the video actually shows the process that we use. So that I think that would help people to understand how the whole process works. And the video is not all that long, so it might be worth looking out for that video and seeing if that helps.
Absolutely. And so we are out of time. I want to thank you both. I will be posting the video of this presentation, the video that Dan just referred to, as well as both of the PowerPoint presentations that you saw today online, and we will be emailing them out to you. We do have a couple of other questions that came in. I want to let those of you who asked them know that we have not forgotten you. We will answer your questions offline. And again, if anyone else has any questions that didn't get answered today, please feel free to email us. I want to thank you all for attending this Global Business School Network webinar, and I hope that we will see you again at another one. Have a great day.